Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Testing Strategies, Best Practices for Success, presented by Meteorix and Kainos Smart. Before we get started, I would like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. During the presentation, all attendees will be silenced, but we encourage you to utilize the chat feature and submit any questions that you may have along the way to me directly. We will collect and address them during the Q&A section of the presentation. Today we will be covering common challenges that organizations are facing during the testing phase of their Workday implementation, top 5 steps for testing readiness, best practices and strategies for gaining efficiencies, and then how organizations are seeing success and creating efficiencies with their testing strategies. But now I would like to introduce you to our presenters, Claudio Valera, Vice President of Delivery at Meteorix, and Will Murray, Head of Professional Services at Kainos Smart. Will, we will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Kate. Now, I know some of you on the webinar today are familiar with Kainos, but for those who aren't, let me give you a quick overview. So we're a European implementation partner who've been in existence for over 28 years. We have locations in Belfast in Northern Ireland, in Dublin in the Republic of Ireland, in the UK in London and Reading, and also 2 offices in Gdansk in Poland. We have 650 plus experienced staff, with approximately 100 of those working specifically in our Workday business unit. We are quite unique in the Workday ecosystem in that we are a 4-time player. So what does that mean? Well, firstly, we're a Workday customer. Secondly, we're a Workday implementation partner. Thirdly, and probably most importantly, we're Workday's primary testing partner. That means that we supply people internally in Workday to assist them with both manual and automated testing. And fourthly, we have a product called Kainos Smart, which is a test automation console specifically designed for the business user. And I will speak to you a little bit about this later. Thanks, Kate.
Thank you for that, Will. Claudio, over to you.
All right, so just a quick introduction to who Meteorix is. So we are headquartered in Boston, as Will had mentioned. We are a sort of a premier Workday deployment partner. That's all we do, so we're completely focused on Workday services and solutions. We're known in the ecosystem for being able to really have a strong play with time to value and accelerated go-lives, as well as having extensive global market experience. We work across all application sets within the Workday application footprint, including HCM, and within HCM, all portions of that, including payroll, benefits, absence management, talent management, et cetera. We also have had the fortunate opportunity to really get ahead of the curve on recruiting as well. We have about 8 projects in flight today. We have quite an extensive financials practice for Workday, and we also are very well known for post-production services. So when a customer goes live, they continue to work with us and take advantage of our service offering to continue to get value and optimization out of the Workday solution. We are very focused on continuous improvement. With the Workday solution, continuing to innovate and provide a lot of new features and functions through updates and even weekly updates. We certainly helped customers adopt that, and we're very proud of the fact that being a very customer satisfaction focused company, we're up to about 96% customer satisfaction today. A little bit more about us, sort of by the numbers. We have about 100 customer engagements that we've delivered to date. 70 of those are go-lives that we've taken customers sort of from beginning to end through these projects and gotten them successfully up and running. I mentioned 96% customer sat. I mentioned global. We have a number of global deployments, and we've really worked across just about 45 countries of operation with a number of our customers. Today we have about 500 certifications across 170 certified consultants. That's really one of the highest certifications to consultant ratios in the ecosystem, which is great because for those of you that are on the phone that are working with Workday or have, you'll know it's a very unified solution, and there's a lot of value in individuals really understanding how all of these pieces fit together. And we have 210 employees, and 13 of those are product leads, which means they get to sit at the table with Workday and participate in product roadmap discussions and really help to continue to add value across the ecosystem as a whole. We're headquartered in Boston with offices in Chicago, and as of late this year, we also opened an office in Montreal and Pleasanton. So we've got good U.S. as well as Canadian physical locations and presence. Okay, so common testing challenges. So as everyone knows on the phone, today's focus is around testing and how Kainos and the Smart solution can really be a very high value add as everyone's going through their deployments and beyond. I always say that when you, for example, look at an industry like real estate, their mantra is always location, location, location. Well, when it comes to Workday deployments, I'm a firm believer that it's testing, testing, testing. Although on time and on budget are really strong success criteria for any project, as some of you on the phone may know, if you really don't do a good job with testing and really have good quality and coverage across all of your testing needs, you can go into production and really experience that, unfortunately, and struggle a bit. The good news is that the Workday system is flexible and sort of agile enough so that you can make corrections or changes pretty quickly, but it's even more important to make sure that through the deployment you're really taking into account all of the different testing challenges and strategies and leveraging a technology like the Smart solution that Kainos has to really make sure that you're delivering on that important portion of the project. So with that, there are 4 areas that really do add complexity to testing. The first one, certainly functional areas. Depending upon what you're actually implementing within Workday, whether that's just HCM, and within HCM there's certainly a number of different functional areas, or even if you're doing a full platform implementation that includes financials, understanding how those pieces fit together, and the fact that when you go into these testing cycles, there is sort of a bit of a natural order as to how you should approach each one of these different areas and how that can feed into some of these areas. So for example, if you're going in and testing the hire to retire process and going through your BPs, you want to take advantage of that so that if you are terminating people and then you go into a cycle where you're starting to test benefits, you'll understand which people, for example, should be COBRA eligible. Those types of things make a difference if you really think through the order of events and the different functional areas that you're testing and how those fit together. Geographies and countries are a big challenge. A lot of the knowledge within the actual countries themselves sit with individuals as to, for example, whether someone in Singapore should be eligible for a specific time off plan. A lot of times the core implementation team doesn't have that knowledge, so you need to make sure that during the testing cycles you're figuring out a way of garnering that knowledge or bringing those individuals into the fold so that they can validate those specific countries' sort of rules and eligibilities for the solution. And unfortunately, a lot of organizations don't really have that well documented, so it does become a bit of a people exercise and a good planning exercise. As you can imagine with countries, you also have the challenges of time zone differences and just different geographical locations. So as you're sort of putting your agendas together for your different testing cycles, just keep in mind that as you're going through, for example, system tests or end-to-end testing, that agenda should take into account how you're going to sort of do touch-based calls across the countries and across the geographies to make sure that everyone's coming together and holistically looking at all of the issues. Because in the end, the hire to retire process, although you may be testing it in the U.S., the other countries of operation should also be testing it, and specifically obviously looking for anything that may be a little bit more regulatory or compliance in nature that's very specific to their country or their operations. Resource availability and overlap. What we find a lot is that within these projects, individuals wear multiple hats. So it's very possible that your benefits workstream lead also happens to be your comp workstream lead. And in those situations, you can't obviously have one person doing 2 things at the same time. So this really comes back to good planning and really good agenda building, so that when you're sort of sequencing events and you're figuring out when you're going to be testing comp versus benefits, you take that type of overlap and that type of sort of parallel activities and turn them into more sequential events, just to ensure that your individuals do have the necessary time and bandwidth to really appropriately cover each one of the areas of responsibility. And if you don't do this, the problem that you'll find is that you'll really start to put strain on your individuals, and as a result, the quality and the coverage of that testing will suffer significantly. And then finally, multiple cycles. Testing is not a one-time event. As most people on the phone know, there are multiple testing cycles within each project, and even beyond. So what you really need to think through is understanding each one of the testing cycles, who needs to participate, and what the purpose for each one of those are. and that will really help you better understand how you need to structure them and what individuals you really need to have participate in those specific testing cycles. One good example of that is UAT, which is one of the final testing cycles that you'll accomplish before you go into the final deploy phase of Workday. If you really start to treat UAT more as a service rehearsal versus an actual traditional bang away at the system and try to figure out what's broken and fix it, that usually pays dividends because, first of all, when you're in UAT, if the project's gone as planned, you should have most of your design pretty well baked and frozen. So you don't want to in any way set the expectation that people should be going in there and actually making recommendations on how to change design or config. But at the same time, you want to use that cycle to do a couple of things. One is to prepare yourself for production, and also leverage that as an opportunity to really continue to do strong organizational change and communication exercises with your stakeholders. So 5 things to think about as you prepare for testing and dealing with those 4 different challenges. When to start test planning. This really needs to start pretty early. Even when you're sort of in the plan phase of the methodology, you want to start looking at individuals, agendas, time frames, and also test scripts. And we're going to talk quite a bit about test scripts, use cases, and how you can really start utilizing a Kainos solution to really help facilitate that and drive better coverage and quality across all of your testing cycles. Know the different test phases within your Workday implementation. Each one has a very distinct purpose. And the purpose for each one of those and what you're actually trying to test are important because they'll drive exactly how you sort of go through that exercise. So for example, if you're going into one of the first testing cycles, which is system test, also sometimes known as unit test, that is really a testing cycle that focuses on the configuration and setup and data validation within the Workday system. At that point in time, you're really not prepared to look at integrations or any custom reports. So as a result, you need to schedule that testing cycle appropriately and think about the different use cases and the different reports or other activities that will help you sort of support that testing cycle. So know the methodology, know your testing cycles, and know the purpose of each so that you can really go in and make sure that you're executing on all those fronts. Ownership and responsibility is also important, and this really dovetails well into how you actually set up and organize your implementation team. But each individual should really have a good responsibility on what particular functional area or responsibility they have. So you may have someone, for example, that is your benefits workstream lead. And although there are different SMEs and other stakeholders or individuals that have a say and will help test and define the benefits system, in the end, it's that one person that's really responsible for ensuring that that particular functional area is delivered successfully and partners with your consultant in doing so. And that's critical because if you have too many sort of owners, it becomes very difficult to have multi-threaded decisions and discussions without having one individual that you can really sort of point to and to help really drive this, your testing and the quality that's needed in that area to completion. The other thing that a lot of clients forget about or don't really think through is entry and exit criteria for each phase. So the methodology itself that you use for implementing Workday is a very agile methodology. So as a result, using this iterative approach, believe it or not, it's okay to actually exit a testing cycle with issues. Now, that doesn't mean you're not tracking the issues in a system like a central desktop and trying to get those to resolution. But for example, understanding that when you go into unit testing, that your exit criteria for that particular testing cycle could, for example, be that we're covering 80% of our scenarios and 90% of those need to pass, and that we're not going to have any critical issues. Having that type of gauge and that type of definition will help you understand when you've actually successfully completed that testing cycle and what activities, if any, or issues can flow into the next testing cycle, which is perfectly viable. And the technology as well as the methodology really support that very well. So all of those things are important to think about as you're preparing for testing. As Will continues to sort of talk about Kainos and the Smart solution, keep these in mind because I think you'll find that the solution will really help you address these issues and in the end, as mentioned earlier, really help you with coverage and quality across all of these different arenas.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Claudio. I might as well start to take over from here. And again, just building on what Claudio has said there over the last few minutes, you know, where can we really start to gain efficiencies through thinking about, you know, the challenges that will be there in front of you and how to overcome them from an early stage. So one of the first ones that when I'm talking to potential clients, they always mention is that it's not always possible to have your subject matter experts for the whole duration of a project. So identifying when they are needed is absolutely necessary, and ensuring that they document what needs to be tested and those expected results. You know, that will absolutely reduce down the need for them to be there 100% at a time. We'll also focus on what needs to be tested and focus on the outcome of that, allowing people to make the correct decisions without constantly having to rely on the subject matter experts. A large part about testing is identifying where tests can be reused or testing can overlap, and I'll show you this a little bit later, particularly when we're using SMART. As you move through the testing life cycle within a Workday implementation, you're constantly building on the stage before. So you're going from your system test or unit test into your end-to-end, through into UAT, and then to post-go live. And each of those is sort of confirming that you are ready to move on to the next phase. So where you can reuse those tests and avoid duplication of work, where you can kill two birds with one stone, is really going to gain you an efficiency throughout your implementation and also post-implementation. Obviously, leveraging the appropriate test tools is very, very important. Depending on who you are and what your organization and how it's structured, you may be at one end of the spectrum using Excel, or you may be at the other end with a really good proprietary tool. Knowing what you need, when to use it, and you know what the best way to use it is very, very important. Central Desktop obviously is absolutely fantastic to be used there, but there's other tools out there as well, and one of them is Kainos Smart, which can be used for test automation. So that's what I'm going to talk to you about for the next 15 minutes or so. Now, I know some of you are already familiar with SMART, but I'm sort of going to take it from basics and build up all the way through to the best way to use that. So what is it? It's a test automation console specifically designed for testing Workday. We have tried to design this so it can be used by anybody on the project. So we do say it's specifically designed for the business user. We try to reduce down the amount of technical knowledge that you actually need to use SMART. I also use an important word there. I've called SMART a test automation console. The difference between SMART and some of the traditional automation tools is that with traditional automation tools such as QTP or Selenium or any other tools that are out there, is that you will need to write the automation yourself. So that will mean thinking about how you're going to write it, putting a framework in place, getting the appropriate resources who have the skills in writing automation, and spending quite a lot of time actually writing the code to test Workday, putting in great things like reporting and error handling to make sure that your test suite will complete from end to end. The last thing you want is to kick off a big test as you go home in the evening and to arrive in the next morning to see that it fell over 10 minutes after you'd kicked it off. So that's what SMART gives you. That's what we do. We write the automation, we create the framework, we ensure that the automation code is always up to date with any Workday releases, whether it's patches or whether it's the 2-year or the 2 releases a year. Now, the reason that Kainos can do that is, as I mentioned earlier, we work very closely internally with Workday, and we can stay on top of any changes that have been made or are going to be made, either via patches, but more than likely via the twice-yearly updates. So what can SMART test? Well, number one, business processes. We cover the high majority of core HCM, absence and benefits business processes. We don't cover them all, and I don't think we ever will, to be very honest. When I work with our customers, I always ask them to list out the business processes that they will be going live with and put just a risk next to them, whether they're going to be high risk, medium risk, or low risk to their organization if they're not configured properly. Now, any of the clients that I've worked with, when I've asked them to do that, we have always had 100% coverage of the high risk and up to usually a 95% coverage of the medium risk. And we always work with our clients then to ensure that we close that gap on the medium risk. When we get to the low risk, those numbers can reduce down. But you know, there's business processes there like update photo, things like that, that they don't really need to be tested that much. You know, it won't be a high risk to your organization if they're not configured quite right. So we also cover integrations. We allow you to automate the execution of all types of integrations within Workday, and also supply you with the tool for comparing and contrasting the outputs of integrations to ensure that your output, if you make a change to your configuration or make a change to anything in Workday, whether it's your business process or not, that the output that you're expecting is still going to match the output that was there previously, whether through structure or through actual data that's coming out in it. And one of our newest features is domain security. I've been really surprised at the excitement around this, but when I get to talk to people about it, I understand it. So what we allow you to do is to set up a matrix to allow you to test what someone can and cannot see or do within Workday. So if you can imagine that you set up a matrix outlining what, for compensation, as I'll show you a little bit later, what the HR admin should be able to do and see, what the comp partner should be able to do and see, what someone's manager should be able to do or see, or what their peers should be able to do or see. And once you've got that defined, you can run that through Smart and it'll report back actual versus expected results. Once you're happy with that, you have that test pack there to rerun over and over again. So if any changes are made, any configuration changes, any changes to security groups, you can run it again to make sure that you haven't inadvertently given someone access to something that they shouldn't have or taken access away. So the power of Smart is that it allows you to, just by supplying data, to run automation against Workday. So that all seems very good. So with automation, I can kick off a test, it'll log into Workday, it'll initiate a business process, it'll enter the data in, and it'll follow the business process through to completion. It interacts with Workday to find out who's next in the Workday chain, whether it's for approval or for a sub-business process, and Smart will adapt to that as Workday does, depending on how your business processes are configured. But the real power of Smart is that you can run these tests concurrently. So not alone will you kick off one test, but you can kick off multiple tests at the same time. And they will execute in multiple browsers against Workday, reducing down the amount of time that actually it'll take you to test from one end of a business process to the other. One of our clients who I spoke to and spoke with us at Workday Rising in Europe actually mentioned that it can take them an hour to possibly just go from one end of a hire process to another. You know, they have a very detailed hire process, but if you think that they needed to do 40 of those, that's a week's worth of work to go through from one end of a hire process to another. Using Smart, they can run that in parallel, and Smart also will interact with Workday as quickly as Workday actually comes back. It'll enter in the data, it won't go for a coffee break, it won't sleep, it'll get through the testing in a lot quicker time. So let me bring you through, before I start to show you Smart in action, let me bring you through where Smart can be used within your implementation. So the first phase that Smart is really beneficial in is unit or system testing. So as I mentioned, it allows you to execute multiple concurrent test cases at the same time, reducing execution time, which is very important during a tight implementation schedule. It allows you to get greater test coverage because it now, by reducing down the time, will allow you to get to all those negative and positive tests that you want to get to, covering all conditions and expected results if you so require. And it will also give you detailed test results which may be necessary for your compliance department depending on your organization. So let me just flick out of the PowerPoint presentation here and actually show you Smart. So what you're seeing here is our Smart demo environment. Now, each of our customers at the moment, I'm very pleased to announce that we just signed 3 in the last week. So we're over 20 customers now. Each of their customers has their own specific instance of Smart. We give them their own URL with their instance and give them their admin username and password to sign in. So the very first thing you're brought to within Smart is the landing page. And I always look at the landing page as sort of displaying the tests that you have previously ran. So as we can see here, I've got some tests that I've ran later that I've ran earlier that I'm going to go through in a little bit more detail to show you where Smart can be utilized. But let me just show you a little bit about the admin of Smart first of all. So by dropping down and going to Workday tenants. So the first thing to see here is that Smart can be pointed at any non-production Workday tenant, whether it's an implementation preview, sandbox, or sandbox preview tenant. We need to do a tiny bit of configuration on our side for this to work for you, but after that, you can run Smart against any and as many of your tenants as you want, as long as they are not production tenants. We also give you the ability to create as many users within Smart as you want. So we don't put any limitation on the number of users you want to create within your organization to utilize the power of Smart. This is done very easily by just giving a username and a password and just one or two little other details. Okay, so during system test, I mentioned, as Claudia did, you want to test specific areas within Workday. So I've got a couple of tests here that I've ran previously, and let me bring you through them. The first one being a personal information regression pack that I've put together. As you can see, I can click on this, and by going into it, I can see that I've got 5 tests that I've executed through Smart. Now, what I've been doing here is I've created 5 different tests to test that the marital status, the different marital statuses that could be selected during the personal information change, that by selecting those by different people in different parts of the world and from different organizations, Smart or Workday will actually function, they will be there, and it will allow the business process to complete. So as you can see in the expected results, I've been giving non-disclosure United Kingdom as a reason, or as the marital status. I've been given civil partnership United Kingdom, separated United States, etc., etc. So within just over 4 minutes, I've been allowed to actually run through Smart 5 different tests, checking out 5 different statuses within Workday and ensuring that the business process is actually completed end to end and is configured correctly. So I can drill down into these to find out exactly what's happened. So again, by clicking, I can drill in and I can see that what has happened here is that Mr. Charles Lewis has initiated a personal information change. Once he's completed that, we can see that an approval was required by the HR partner, which has actually completed, and once that has finished, I have decided to rescind the process. And again, similarly for each of the 5 other tests, we can just drill in and see exactly what has happened. Here's a difference, that for Widowed USA, initiated by Betty Lou to change her status to widowed, that there has been an approval, but I haven't actually selected for this process to rescind. So how do I go about actually allowing Smart to do this? Well, what you need to give Smart is a spreadsheet containing data, and it's the data that you want Smart to input into your Workday tenant. So the same as a normal user would do, Smart will log in and it will put the data into the fields that you actually give it. So what do these spreadsheets look like? So this here is the spreadsheet that I actually ran through Smart earlier today. Now, let me first of all explain the structure of it. So columns A to E are really reference data. It's telling you exactly what needs to go into each row for Smart to be able to run that data through Workday. Again, so what data do we need to give? A test case ID and the expected result. We've seen those coming out in the logs that I showed you a little bit earlier. Whether we want to rescind or cancel that business process. Sometimes when you're running, particularly in the system test phase, you may need to run these tests over and over again by going in and making some config changes or going in and making some tweaks to the system. So by rescinding the process each time, we can see that the business process does complete from initiation to completion, but then it rescinds that data out. So we can see that it has taken place within the Smart logs, but also if you go into Workday and look at the worker history, you will see that these processes have taken place, but they can be ran again and again because the information has been rescinded or cancelled back out of Workday. So we need to specify who's been logged in to initiate this, in this case Ian Murray, and what the marital status that they actually want to change to. So as you can see, at this stage I've taken not disclosed United Kingdom. So each row is actually a test case itself, or each column is a test case. So we can see that I have 5 separate test cases here, each of them logging in as different people and selecting different marital status. Now, I created this myself in a sort of a strange way, that we have a tool within Smart called the wizard-based test case creation tool, which is easier for me to say than you. So to actually access this, I'm going to click on Create Test Cases. Now, what Smart allows you to do is it allows you to select from a list of business processes. Let's select the request one-time payment, and select from which tenant you actually want to create these test cases from. So rather than me having to go in and create that spreadsheet that I showed you there manually, Smart will bring you through the wizard-based test case creation tool, allowing you to actually build up this data within the tool. Now, as you'll see, I've been prompted for a username and password here. The reason for that is that we really only want you, well, you should only be able to see through Smart the information that you can actually see within Workday yourselves. So you need to give your Workday credentials here, because anything you see on screen, once I get past this, is data coming from the tenant that I have selected. So again, let me just type this in here. That's amazing, I got it right first time. So if we were doing a request one-time payment, as we've seen a little bit earlier, what I would need to do is decide on who I want to initiate this one-time payment as. So I'm pointing Smart currently at our GMS tenant, so I'm just going to put in Logan McNeil and hit enter. So Smart at this stage has interacted with my GMS tenant and has seen that Logan McNeil does exist and has brought back Logan as the initiator. Who do I want to create a one-time payment for? So I'm just going to put in surname Murray and I'm going to search. So as you can see again, Smart is interacted with my Workday tenant, and it's brought back any people within, any workers within my tenant who have the surname or first name Murray. So I'm going to select Ian Murray. So the next thing you'll see is the information that you would need to give within Workday to actually do a one-time payment. So things like the effective date, by clicking on that I get a nice little wizard that pops out and I can select the 28th. Any one-time payment plan. So as I mentioned earlier, Smart is interacting with my Workday tenant at the moment. So nothing is hard-coded here. If I was to go into Workday, into my Kainos PT2 GMS tenant, these are the plans that I would see if I was actually doing a one-time payment in real time. So I'm going to select Spot Bonus. Again, similar for reason, select bonus, whether you want a payroll effect, an amount or percentage, and the currency. So that's all the information I need to give Smart to actually create a test in the spreadsheet as you've seen. If I click next, the next thing I'm asked for is a description of the test. So I'm going to say one-time payment for Ian Murray. I need to give it a test case ID. I think it's always good practice for testers to use unique test case IDs so you can trace back to the requirements and the expected result. Payment. Again, I get the choice to rescind or cancel, and I'm just going to click on Add Test Case here. There we go. I'll actually click on it this time. So what's happened here is you can see that our test case has moved over to the right, and I can now continue to create my test cases in this manner. But I'm not going to. I'm just going to click on the Generate button. And what the Generate button does is it creates the spreadsheet that I showed you earlier. So in this case, for a request one-time payment, it has created the spreadsheet for me, and it has created my test case there. So again, that is how I went about creating my spreadsheet that I showed you for the personal information change that I ran through. The way I usually use Smart from then on is that I will actually paste those test cases across and go in and make some slight changes. So I might want to change the person who's initiating it, so it could be Steve Morgan, and who actually gets it. And also the different type of bonus or even the amount. You might have some condition rules based on the amount that you're given a request one-time payment. So you can change those very quickly in here and build up your test cases in a very quick manner in this way. Okay, so again, if I go back to Smart and go back to my landing page. So one of the areas that I said that Smart can be used for your system testing as well is in both positive and negative test cases. So it's always really good to check what people can do, but sometimes it's equally as important to check what they can't do. So if I look at my edit service dates pack here, you can see that I actually have 2 out of 3 has completed. So this means that one of my tests has not completed to the end. So I'm going to click on it and go in and see what's actually happened here. So we can see very quickly that I have 3 tests, and the 2 of them have completed and 1 of them has failed to complete. So again, let's look at what the actual expected results that I'm looking for here. So the first test is that Logan McNeil can change his seniority date for Ryan Taylor. So that's ran through. Again, we can click in and see that that's actually happened. Absolutely brilliant. Good. The second one is similar, that Logan can change his seniority date for Charles Lewis. Let's look at the third one, and we can see that this is actually a negative test. So I was expecting that this shouldn't have completed. So what I've set up in my spreadsheet is that Charles Lewis is trying to change his seniority date for Ryan Taylor. Now I know that Charles Lewis shouldn't have the security rights to actually be able to do that within Workday. So let's go in and see what's happened. Again, by clicking on my edit service dates, I'm brought in and I can see that there has been a failure. But you can see that a screenshot has now been taken. So if I click on this and just expand it a little bit, we can see that we're logged in as Charles Lewis, and we've tried to initiate the edit service dates business process, which does not appear for Charles. And that's exactly what we're expecting. Charles should not have the rights to actually do this. So fantastic. It's a negative test, but it's passed. So it's a good positive negative test. The expected result has matched the actual result, which is brilliant. So let me just go back into my presentation. Oh, apologies. I'll go to the right one. So I've tried to frame this around what some of our customers are doing and how they're using it. And this is a real-life example of how people have been using Smart within a global implementation. Now, we've worked very closely with this company to create 2,500 tests within Smart, which we created over a 3-week period for execution in their first system test cycle. Now, the reason there was so many is that this company was going live in Big Bang over 60+ geographical locations, and they wanted to do positive and negative tests. So we had to test both global and local rules for this large implementation. Now, once we had created our test pack, they moved to their second cycle, as Claudio mentioned earlier. We went to our second cycle, and we were able to re-execute these 2,500 tests in under a week as well, which was absolutely fantastic. It allowed people to make their changes and rerun again and ensure that the results they were getting were actually what they were expecting. Let's move on to end-to-end testing, the next phase. So how do we sort of build on what we've been doing earlier? So our test execution, we can minimize the rework by reusing the tests that we have actually created, the spreadsheets that we've created during system testing. We can now sequence these tests, I'll show you that in a minute, and we can input a large variety of data for integration testing. So let me show you how I've done that. Let me go back to my Smart homepage. And as you can see, I'm going to select the current salaries test run. So I'm going to click on this. This looks slightly different from the test run that you've seen previously. So what I've done here is I've actually sequenced these tests to run in blocks one after another. So I've created an EIB to output the current salary for all employees. Then I've scheduled a number of hires, a number of request payments, and a number of request compensation changes to run. And after this, I've ran the same EIB again, which allows me to check very quickly the output from the first EIB, my first run against the second run of exactly the same EIB, but once I've done some business process changes within that time frame. So that's great. We can see they've all ran, which is fantastic. But how do I know that my first run and my second run are either the same or different? Well, Smart also gives you a tool called the Integration Comparison tool, which allows you to compare output files from two different integrations, or from the same integration which has been run at different times. I'm just going to click into this here. So as we can see, I have done a payroll integration comparison after BPs have ran. I've uploaded a baseline payroll file with a payroll file after I've ran the BPs, and I've been told that they don't match. So by clicking in again, we can see very quickly that Smart will identify where those differences are and will highlight to you in very clear way where the difference is. So we can see here that certain parts of the two payroll run files are differing, and we can see that this is around the amount that has actually been executed. So how are our customers seeing this? Well, one of our customers who spoke very recently, about Smart very recently at Workday Rising, they have a large number of integrations. They have, when they started using Smart, they had about 100. They're up to 150 plus now. So within the same time frame, they've been able to increase their integration test coverage by 40%, but reduce the integration testing effort by over 55%. So it's allowed them to get extended coverage and get to test everything that they want to test, but actually reduce down the amount of effort and time that it's taken them to do that, which is absolutely fantastic. Let's move on to UAT. So how can we see where people are seeing success in this? Well, once again, I'm going to reuse the test that I have created within Smart during the previous stages. I'm also going to use it to prepare data for specific scenarios. So you don't want to go and have to create 100 positions and hire people into those 100 positions if you want your UAT testers to come in and start doing some testing on some anonymized data. So Smart can be used for that. But also, one of the most important things with UAT is that you're exposing your Workday tenant to a wider audience for the first time. And you have to make 100% sure that what those people can see and do is exactly what you want them to do. So let me flick back to Smart again and see how we can help with that. So as you can see here, I have created a compensation security pack that I want to test. Now what this is a very similar spreadsheet to the one that I showed you earlier, which I created again within WBTC, our wizard-based creation tool. And what I've done is I've created a matrix saying that I am going to run a set of compensation tests to check what my HR partner do, what my absence partner can do, what my manager, a colleague, a finance executive, security partner, payroll interface partner, etc., can do against Ian Murray. So I want to check that these people have certain rights and privileges set up within security that will allow them to actually either add a stock grant or in this case, not be able to view the merit statement history. What I've done is I've uploaded this spreadsheet and I've actually executed it through Smart. So let me just click in here to see how the results come out. So as you can see, these have all passed. Again, each one of these tests is equivalent or relates to one of the columns in the spreadsheet. And if I go in and look at the first one, which is the HR partner, we can see that Logan McNeil, we have tested against Ian Murray to see that their expected results, as we've defined within our spreadsheet, actually is the same as the actual results. And we can see all the way down that it has. So that's great. We know at this stage that our security is set up as we have defined it. But what happens if we go in and make some changes to a security group, or if we go in and make some changes within Workday, and we just want to make sure that the people still can and cannot see what they should and shouldn't be able to do? So I have an example here where I've done this and reran the tests. And again, you can see that only 6 out of 7 of these have passed rather than 7 out of 7 the previous time. So I'm just going to delve in a little bit deeper here. And again, we can see the same, look exactly the same, but we can see that one of these has failed. So I can see that I've been testing a colleague of Ian Murray's, who's Nathan Moore, to see what he couldn't see against Ian Murray. So let's go in here. And we can very, very quickly see that what we were expecting around compensation, for viewing compensation, and a lot of the ones there where there's total compensation or future payment plans, the actual result has not actually met the expected result. So let's have a look at view compensation. Again, we can see a spreadsheet has been taken, and if I make this a little bit larger for you, we can see that Nathan Moore logged in cannot view Ian Murray's compensation in here. And again, we were expecting that he should have been able to. He actually can't see it, which is correct, that we could see that that related action was not there of Ian Murray. So how are our clients actually seeing this in real life? So a couple of examples. One of the higher education institutions we're working at, as I mentioned earlier, had a number of test cycles that they needed to go through, but they wanted to create anonymized positions and hires for these for the user acceptance testing, so that the people doing the testing weren't seeing sensitive data. So we worked with them to create the positions and the hires through Smart. Now, the problem that the guys had is that every Monday morning their tenant was refreshed, and the testing started on a Monday afternoon. So it was not possible for them to go in and manually recreate these positions and hires each week for the testing. But using Smart, they were able to schedule and kick the run off for themselves, so that when they came in and UAT needed to start, that the positions and hires were there for them. Around the security testing, again, this is it's a great feature that's getting some fantastic feedback. On a global multi-wave rollout that we've recently worked on, we worked with the implementation team to ensure that we had the security defined, and we were able to run it over and over again to ensure that the user acceptance testers could only see and do what they were able to do. And again, once these are set up once, it's very, very easy to just reuse this and kick them off again. Finally, post-go-live regression. So you've gone live, you have all these test cases. So any time that you want to run them, you can run them. We put no limitation on the number of tests or the amount that you actually run these tests. So if you want to run them each week, absolutely fine. If you want to run them for regression each time there's a Workday update, twice a year, absolutely. It allows you to run a high volume of tests through to cover all the scenarios that you want to test, and some that you may not have had the time or the people to actually get to in the past. And the ongoing process optimization. So anytime that you make any configuration changes or any changes to your Workday tenant, whether it's in your sandbox or your sandbox preview tenant, you can run your tests over and over again to ensure that they're completing, that there is approvers in the right places, and that your security is still aligned with how you have defined it initially. Again, let me show you how easy within Smart it is to reuse. So as we can see, I have a test run here. All I need to do is click down off the related action, click reuse. Give it a unique name, so I want to run this for November now. Click save, I have it scheduled, or I have it sequenced to run in specific order. And then I just select the Workday tenant that I actually want to execute this against. So again, I want to run it against my Kainos PT2 tenant, and I just click execute. So what will now happen is Smart will kick those tests off, and it'll execute them all the way through and bring you back to the results when it's finished. As we can see, some of them have completed already, the others are queued, and as time goes on and as they have them sequenced, only once some have completed will the next ones actually move on. So how are some of our customers actually using this? Well, one of our multinational corporations that we've worked with who are live now for a couple of years, they have business process and integrations across 60+ countries. So they've been able to execute and verify the Workday Update test suite with the assistance of Smart with a reduction in 80% of effort, which I think you can all agree is an absolute huge gain. But they've also been able to execute their largest and most comprehensive test suite to date using Smart. So not alone have they got the 80% reduction in time and effort, but they've also been able to extend the amount of testing that they have been able to do using Smart. Guys, apologies, I tend to talk a lot, so I know I've slightly gone over. So, Kate, I think it probably is a good time for me to be quiet and to move on to some of the questions that may have come in.
Yes, we had a few come in, and then encourage anybody, if you have any more, just to use the chat feature and send them to me, the host, Kate Andreasen. But right now, the first question, what size of companies can use SMART?
Oh, okay. Well, we've been using it with everyone from very, very small to very, very large, and everywhere in between. There really is no limitation. Our licensing model is very similar to Workday, so there are tiered licensing which is based on the number of employees that you have within your within Workday. But if you think about it, you still need to do testing no matter what size your company is. Now, the amount of configuration that you've done really depends on the organization. I've seen some very small organizations with very, very complex condition rules and business processes, and I've seen some very large ones with fairly simple ones. So it just really does depend on the amount of risk you want to mitigate by getting to the amount of testing that you can get to using SMART.
We have another one. Where can we find a list of business processes supported?
Okay. Probably the best way to do that, because I don't have any safe harbor statement up at the beginning of this, is that we will be able to share them. If you get in contact with myself or even with Claudio, we'd be more than welcome to set up an individual call with anyone where we can bring you through SMART in more detail and supply you with the list of business processes that are there. I didn't get to it today, but it is a fairly extensive list that I would be quite confident to say will cover all your priority 1 and priority 2 business processes within core HCM, absence, and benefits.
Great. Here's another one. Since Workday has weekly release updates and 2 major upgrades a year, how often do you update your tool to keep with these changes, and how will that impact the test scenarios already set up in the system?
Okay, cool. I really wish the answer to that is we can spend about a week a year updating our scripts, but the real answer is we've got a team of 25 people who are constantly updating our scripts, the automation underneath. But because we work internally with Workday, for the patches, we are actually working on next week's patch already. So the automation will be there on Monday morning for next Monday's update if anything does change. How does it impact the data? It doesn't really. The data stays static. We will make sure the automation is there for any new fields, for any fields that are removed, or for any UI changes or any changes that are made by Workday. If your business process still requires the same data, then your data spreadsheet can actually stay the same. We look after all the sort of the maintenance of the underlying stuff.
Okay, great. One more. You mentioned that the automation test, the case option where they can add data. They're curious, does Kainos write the test, or can we create our own automated test?
So we will write all the automation, and it really is because we are the ones with the access to the latest version of code. So if anyone else was to do it, it would be out of date. Plus, we'd need to give you some fairly hairy security access into our development environment. But if you're talking about possibly creating the tests themselves through the data spreadsheet and through SMART, we've worked anywhere between actually doing it 100% for some of our customers, so they've asked us to come in and create all their test cases for them, and to the complete opposite end of the spectrum, where we will come in, we will supply 3 days training and work with the guys for a few days, and then they will go to continue to create the tests themselves.
Will, does this support HCM only, or is financials included?
Financials is not currently included, but we did announce at Rising a few weeks ago that it will be coming next year.
Okay. Do you have test cases built around Workday's advanced compensation or performance management modules?
Not at the moment, but again, they are on our roadmap, which we would be happy to discuss with anyone if they do want to follow up with us after this for a demo or even for another call. We're quite similar to Workday again, that I won't try to think I know what our customers want. So we really do stay in very close contact with our customers and ask them to advise us on our roadmap, and our roadmap will change accordingly. You know, the most that people have been asking for at the moment is financials. Once that's out of the way, I think it's the roadmap is open to be sort of defined by our customers.
Okay. Another one, what is the turnaround for any test cases we create to have them automated? All you need to do is to create the test data. Once you've created the test data, you can just execute it there and then. So there is no real turnaround time. Once you have Smart and you can start to create the spreadsheets that I've shown you, you just literally upload them into Smart and click go, and it will execute them there and then for you. Okay. Well, Will, I think you're officially off the hook. if you want to... Everyone, I want to thank you again for your time. The last slide is Claudio and Will's contact information. And if you have any follow-up questions or want anything more in more detail, feel free to reach out to them directly. I will also be sending out a survey on how you felt the quality of the presentation was handled. And if you would like a copy of the deck, please reach out to me, which you can just reply to the survey email. That being said, thank you again for everyone's time. Will, Claudio, thank you so much. And thank you, everyone, for dialing in. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thanks, Kate. Thanks, Claudio.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Yeah, bye.